Hello everybody. Today we're going to look into how we can execute the same chunk of code multiple times using a loop, and how we can make our lists more useful by iterating over them. So our goal for today is to learn about loops. There are a few different kinds of loops that we can use in Python, and one of the main reasons we want to learn about loops is so that we can do more with lists. Most of what we're going to be doing today is going to be just writing short little scripts and then running those scripts. We're going to write them as scripts instead of just messing around in the REPL, purely for the sake of having syntax highlighting and auto indentation in our editor. As I mentioned, there are multiple types of loops that exist, but the base type of loop in almost all programming languages is called the while loop. And in Python, you write that with the while keyword. But first we're going to set a variable named a equal to 0, and then we're going to say while a is less than 5. You put a colon here, and then when you go down here, you'll notice that it indented. And this is where we put the block of code that we want to run multiple times. So for this, we are going to print this is a, and then we'll put a in there. And then we also want to change a. So we're going to save this and bounce back over to our terminal, and we'll run python loops.py. And so we started with 0, and each iteration we print this is the value of a, and then we iterate it, and we keep going, and we keep going. But if we looking back at our code, we had if a is less than 5, then you want to do this. But once a got to 5, then we stopped. So that's the whole point of while, and that is it'll evaluate whatever expression comes after it before we do the indentation. And if that's true, it'll execute the block. If it's false, it'll just keep going. There are some special keywords that you can pair together with loops in Python. One of them that's a little bit strange compared to other programming languages is actually else. So if we put else with a colon here, we can say something else, and this will be, we've reached 5. We save that again. And if we run that, you'll see that we have an additional line printed out here of we've reached 5 once we've gotten to the 5th point. And that's because once this becomes false, it will fall into this else block, and then it'll keep going from there. In order to demonstrate how the loop actually worked, I did skip over one important detail, and that's this a plus or equal 5. The reason that we have to do this is because if we don't, this will stay true forever. A will never change, and thus 0 is always less than 5. That puts us into what's known as an infinite loop. So let's just take a look at what happens if we do that. I guess we can just comment this out. If we comment this out, save it, and then we go run it again, you'll see that this is a 0, and then it just keeps going forever. You have to hit Control-C in order to break out of that infinite loop. So keep that in mind when you're working with while loops, that you must always either manually break out of the loop, which I'll show you how to do in a second, or you're going to need to modify something that's used in the condition originally, otherwise you'll run into an infinite loop. While loops are great, but they're a little dangerous in the sense that you can run into an infinite loop pretty easily. But the other thing is that there's a more efficient loop within Python that we can use. That loop is the for loop. And the reason I say more efficient is not necessarily for performance reasons, but most of the time when we want to loop over anything, it's because we want to do this for the sake of we have a list that needs operated on. So I'm going to delete all of this code. And then we're going to say, whoops, get that out of the way. My list is equal to, and then we'll just put some numbers in here. And what we actually want to do with this list is determine whether each number is odd or even. So for that, we're going to use a for loop so we can look at each number individually. And that goes for num, which this is just a temporary variable in my list. That rolls off the tongue pretty well. For each number in my list, then do the following. So if num is mod2 equals 0, which this just means that if there's no remainder if you divide by 2, then print num is even. Then we're going to use another keyword called continue, And down here, we're going to say print num is odd. We'll save this. Let's run it and see what happens. 1 is odd, 2 is even, so on and so forth. Looking back at this, I wanted to show you the keyword continue. I normally wouldn't do this. I'd probably delete this and turn this into an else. But what this does is, if we look at this as if it weren't in a loop and this continue wasn't here, what would happen is num would go through this, and if it were even, it would print as even, and then it would continue on to the next line. So 2 would be even and 2 would be odd if we didn't do this continue. And what continue does is it says go to the next iteration of the loop and keep doing your business. So I would have probably written this like this. I would just say else and indent this the same. And this makes sure that only one of these events happen. Okay, to show you the last keyword that we can use with our lists, we're going to modify our list up here, and then we're going to change what we're doing down here. We're going to do something slightly different. And that is, if num is less than or equal to 5, we want to print num is less than 6. And then else, we want to break. So we'll save this, and I'll show you what it does. We had 6 numbers in our list, yet only 3 of these actually were processed by our loop. And the reason for that is because our 4th iteration hit this 6, we fell into this else, and then we broke. And what break actually does, it's similar to continue, but instead of going to the next iteration, it actually just continues with the script. So we break out of the loop. It stops the loops dead in its tracks, and none of the items that come after that would be processed by the loop itself. And that does it for loops. The for and the while loop are 2 of the most basic things we use in programming. Like I said, I think you're going to use for far more often than you're going to use while, because for is so useful when working with lists. And even though my examples here were a little bit simple, I'm sure you can see all the things that you could do if you had a list of names and you wanted to print something out, or if you wanted to do some math on something. There's a lot you can do with lists, and it's super common for you to have a data set that you would package in a list and need to do something to every item inside that list. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you liked it. I'm going to continue doing some Python stuff, but I also held a survey that I put on Twitter a few weeks ago to see what my audience would be interested in learning. And some of the results were Rails, Go, iOS, some Elixir, some more Docker things, but I'm going to keep that survey open for a little while. So if you want to respond to it, I will post a link in the description below, and I would love it if you would fill that out just so I know where I should steer the ship. Thank you so much for watching again. If you would like this, please give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe down below and share this with your friends.